Hello, welcome to Talk It Out. This is a show presented by UK Bike Fit, and this is the man. This is Dan from UK Bike Fit. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
You okay?
All good.
Thanks for having me on today. My name's also Daniel. I am not a bike fitter. I'm an amateur triathlete, cyclist, wannabe YouTuber. And today we're going to have a bit of a discussion about base training and the winter base. And we're not pitching this as it's not a how-to. We're not telling people they're wrong or right. We're genuinely having a conversation about what training we're doing over the winter. And it's sort of evolved into this, we might as well discuss it on the show, right? So I'm going to share my thoughts and experiences. You're going to share your thoughts and experiences and a bit more knowledge than I have, and we'll see where we get to. But if you have any thoughts about winter base training, specifically if you're in the UK or in a country where it's cold in the winter and you can't ride outside all day every day, let us know in the comment section down below and we'll be all ears. And at the time of recording, we're very, very close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. So if you could please hit that subscribe button, we'd be so very grateful. Thank you very much. The winter base then, Dan. Get on your bike 20 hours a week, pedal at zone 2, job done, right?
Yeah, so this is the theory that seems to have been adopted over the many years, isn't it? So winter base, let's just start with what is winter base, right? So base training has been sort of adopted from the pro cyclists that, race all year or through the spring to autumn. And then this winter period is their base training period where they go out and just ride easy miles and do very little else and just ride zone 2 or endurance or whatever you want to call it, so that they're sort of prepared and having a bit of a off time from doing all their interval training and all their racing. And yeah, a lot of people seem to have adopted that into their own training. And when I say people, I mean like recreational cyclists, hobby cyclists, amateur cyclists, who maybe don't train as much. So I think there's a place for it, but we're going to dig into what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks, and whether people who are, and I guess we're talking to mostly amateur cyclists. I'm sure the pros haven't cottoned on to this amazing podcast just yet.
I thought Ben Swift watches this now, doesn't he?
But
He's been on the other week.
He watches it, downloads it, and shares it. Hi, Ben. So yeah, we're going to talk about whether it's right, who it's right for, and when it works and when it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. I do know some people who have not embraced the winter base, and that is the South Normanton Cycling Club group ride, because that is full gas year round. So
there's no base in that ride.
No. All right then. So yeah, shall I tell you a bit about my winter thoughts on winter base?
You've done a bit of base training, then you've done some winters where you haven't been base training.
Right. So I've been training for about 10 years now. I'm not any good by any means, but I've certainly been sort of competitive in age group or amateur racing, and then not competitive and so on. I've done a mixture. I've followed plans, I've been coached, I've been self-coached, I've done all sorts. A mixture of periodization, reverse periodization, just riff racing all winter, all sorts. And this winter, I am doing what I think is the winter base. But the reasons why I'm doing it is just because you can only do what you can do, right? I know when we look at, we follow pros on Strava, we have some local tours that you follow and you think, that's good training. We're not those people. We don't have the resources of those people, and more importantly, the abilities of those people. So training for me I'm running, cycling and swimming. It's hard. I'm quite a heavy guy. I'm 100 odd kilos at the minute. When I'm doing running or swimming or even cycling, it impacts me quite a lot. And versus a Tour de France rider who's 60 kilos, who can go out and ride a few hours and perhaps it doesn't impact them as much. I'm finding the actual fatigue from training is more than it perhaps was if I was super fit. So having a period of training that isn't that difficult on paper, in my mind, is going to enable me to get to a state of being fitter so that then I can absorb some harder training. If I'm looking at total training in the week spread across 3 sports, if I was to do some more intensity in any of those disciplines, I've got to cut back on the volume somewhere else. And whether that would get me fitter or not, I don't know, but I also have weight loss as a goal. So doing more training and burning more calories helps me get towards those goals. So I'm cycling about 4 to 6 hours a week, mostly in zone 2, a little bit of tempo, a little bit of sweet spot, but nothing too much. Running 4 hours a week and swimming an hour to an hour and a half a week for a total of about 10 to 12 hours a week of combined training. But when I'm running, when I get to a hill, I'm at threshold very often, so I'm getting some intensity, but not through the bike.
Yeah, I think it comes back to again, like what you would normally do through if this is your off season, what you're doing through your on season. So if you say you're doing 4 to 6 hours a week of cycling now and doing it all at zone 2, what sort of volume and intensity would you do in your race season?
The volume would probably be double that.
If we're just talking about cycling.
Yeah, probably double that. It'll be 10 to 12 hours of riding, and there would be, let's say that's spread across 5 rides. 2 of them would be very hard. 2 of them would be a chain gang or a club ride or a quick race, something like that.
Yeah.
The rest of it would still be relatively easy.
Okay. So in your case specifically then, like that training load is at least double what you're currently doing now on the bike in terms of volume and intensity. And I think this is where a lot of people, like you're doing running and swimming as well. So
have I mentioned I do triathlon, Dan? Do I need to tell you about it again?
Triathlon, Dan, nice. Yeah. So if you're just doing cycling, this is where a lot of people sort of misunderstand or misuse base training and think they're gaining fitness when actually they're probably detraining. Again, we're talking around amateur recreational cyclists here. The pro cyclists who are riding upwards of 30 hours a week sometimes, for a lot of the year, they need a break. So they need a rest, their bodies need to recover, they need to get rid of any niggles or any injuries that they may or may not have. So having a short period of detraining isn't going to impact them because they're using it as recovery. Instead of detraining, that is recovery. For the majority of cyclists, amateur, recreational, hobby cyclists who are potentially training, maximum maybe 10 hours a week, 'cause we've got jobs and lives and kids and whatever. If you're doing 10 hours a week through summer, and maybe you're either doing some amateur races or you're at least doing some higher intensity rides, the club rides that go hard up some hills and things like that, and then your body is very used to that training load. If you then get to winter and still do the same amount of hours, because we can't fit in extra volume because we're all busy lives and whatnot, if you do exactly the same amount of hours but less intensity, so just zone 2 and just endurance, by definition you're going to detrain. You're going to get less fit because you are not doing the same amount of workload that you were in the summer compared to what you are in the winter. And I think a lot of people think, I'm still doing zone 2, I'm still doing endurance, I'm still doing base, so I'm still getting fitter. Whereas actually, you may be getting fitter in one aspect in terms of that low intensity type endurance type thing. But again, I'd argue if you're only doing 10 hours, that's probably not enough. You probably need to do 30 hours of endurance to actually make a meaningful difference to aerobic endurance, or at least a higher level of volume than you would in the summer. So yeah, I think they think, I'm still getting fit, I'm still doing just low intensity, and it still has an impact on my upper end power. Where actually they are just getting less and less fit, and then get through the winter and start training again and wonder why is it so hard.
Yeah, some amateurs though, a lot of them are still coming into the winter training detrained, even if you're not having to have an end of season break because of the huge training volume that pros ride. People go on holidays, people have like family commitments, you know what it's like throughout the year where we're looking at events to do and you're like, I'm using some vouchers at home to be able to get the weekend away and all that, and you've got to pay that back at some point. So I think some people do come into the winter in a state of they're not ready to do the intense training, but I guess what you're saying is don't drag out that return to fitness like the whole winter,
absolutely, yeah. Or don't just do, if you're not increasing your volume because you've not got the time to, because you're not a pro cyclist, then to increase training load you have to increase intensity. So yeah, if you've been off the bike for a few weeks because you've been on holiday or life or whatever, then by all means start that first 2-3 weeks of just getting back into it and just turning the legs and doing some low intensity riding. But once that period of getting used to being back on the bike is done, you really need to start increasing the intensity or the volume, at least one, to make sure that you're increasing your training load and therefore getting fitter. What
are your thoughts about training not for the next year, training for like longer than that? Because I hear a term battered around a lot about, their aerobic engine, and that takes years to build and all that. If you're just doing short, intense stuff, does that actually add to your what people refer to as your aerobic engine. So I feel like I'm 10 years into riding a bike now, and I've got a level of, like, I think it's called, like, I don't know, base fitness or base level. I feel like I know that I could do some training and get close to that again, but I know that I didn't make that last year or the year before, maybe the year before that. It's taken like the culmination of years. So is there an argument to say, yeah, let's say you ride your bike 10 hours a week, zone 2 of the winter, and it might not be enough stimulus to get you fit for spring, but maybe it adds to the package for you the year after. Is that a thing, or is that just complete myth?
Well, so if you did that, if you trained in that mentality and then had 3 months off the bike for whatever reason, does that base fitness last with you through that 3 months? No, because you've probably got to get that back in that 3 months. You'll have lost a lot of aerobic fitness. So I don't really buy into the whole, it takes years and years and years to develop, because you can lose it very quickly through detraining. So if it takes years to develop and it can be lost that quickly, then is it going to, like, what, are you really training for 10 years down the line? You don't know what's going to happen within that 10 years. You might have years off the bike for whatever reason. You don't know. So I think because it can be lost, it can't be, maintained. But again, like, it depends on what your goals are, right? So if you want to get really, 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 really good at riding for 5 hours, and you're never going to go over your zone 2 power, whatever you want to call it, then by all means, just go and ride for 5 hours at zone 2 power, and you'll get really good at that. But if you then come up against the hill and need to get over that hill at high power, you're not going to have that capacity there because you've not trained it. So again, it's like your training's, it's got to be specific to what you're trying to aim for. So if we're just talking about increasing fitness in general and being able to ride a bike well, then you need to train for all eventualities. So when you go out for a ride, you don't just stick at the same power forever. There's always little spikes, and club rides, there's always little kicks and races to the town signs and all that stuff.
Some little kicks, yeah.
So yeah, if you want to train and be good at that, then you have to train for that. But if you're never ever going to do that, then by all means just go and ride at zone 2. But that's all you'll be good at.
And when we talk about intensity, like, what's your interpretation of intensity? So when people say, "Oh, I'm doing some intensity," what does that mean?
I guess it can be anything. Yeah. I'd say, like, you can do doing intervals, because you can do intervals at whatever intensity you like. I guess it's anything over what we're calling endurance zone 2. Anything above that, you, by definition, can't hold that for a long period of time. So therefore, you need to train it in intervals to be able to do multiple of that power.
I think I used to think, oh, that's threshold. Over threshold is intense, on threshold is below. But actually now, when you've done like a 3 by 20 minute sweet spot, if you've done this session, that's difficult, or long sweet spot blocks. If someone was to ask me about, oh, are you training with much intensity at the minute? I'd say, well, not a lot, but I'm doing quite a bit of sweet spot, yeah. That I would class sweet spot as intensity, because it is a tough workout, even though it's below threshold, was it 87 to 93% roughly of FTP, I still class that as like an intense workout.
Yeah.
How about you?
I mean, I'm trying to avoid getting into the argument of what is zone 2, because that's a whole podcast by itself, isn't it? But in theory, if we're using that zone model, a true zone 2 workout should be quite hard, really. You should get to the end of it if you're doing it for long enough, and think, that was a workout. So intensity can be anything, but it's got to be relative to the time that you're riding for. So I would say like a zone 2 ride for long enough can be quite intense.
Yeah.
But you do a long stint of it in one big block. Whereas I think, again, going back to base training and what people consider base training, I think a lot of people, again, amateur recreational cyclists who don't have hours and hours and hours to train, would, through winter, get on their bike indoors for an hour and do zone 2, and that'll be it. Whereas just doing that intensity for 1 hour isn't enough to make a significant change at that level of workload or that power. You need to be doing those sorts of rides for much longer, which is where if you're doing base training, you really need to be doing a lot of hours per week to make it beneficial and improve fitness through winter. Otherwise, you will just detrain.
Okay, so if I am an amateur cyclist, and I've got 6 to 8 hours a week, which I still think is quite a decent amount of volume for most people. Yeah. What should I be doing? I know you employ Ewan as a coach, so if I go to Ewan and say, Ewan, I've got 6 to 8 hours a week of training, and in March I want to be ripping the legs off the boys at the Darley Moor Crits, what sort of stuff is he going to be setting me, do you think?
Yeah, because this is where Ewan's really good, because like we specifically target our coaching and training plans to people who are time crunched and don't have hours and hours a week to train, because if you did, just riding your bike for 30 hours, you'd get fitter, like whatever you did, it doesn't really matter. If you've only got 6 to 8 hours a week, it really matters what you do, and you don't want to waste those hours. If you're trying to get fitter, you don't want to waste those hours on the bike just doing whatever and not getting anywhere.
Can nobody look at my Strava for the last 6 weeks, please?
So
that might be the current plan.
So yeah, Ewan he'd never ever just do 1 week at base unless it's a recovery week.
Yeah.
There'd always be some sort of intervals or intensity, by definition, whatever we've just decided, but there would always be some sort of, because you need it when you're only training 6 to 8 hours a week. You can't just do the same thing for that low volume of time, relatively low volume of time, and get fitter. Especially if you've just said your target is to do some crits and racing and so on, you need to start getting that intensity in now. And talking about racing, the other thing I think lends itself really well to doing hard, intense workouts through winter is that when it does come to race season, and maybe you're doing a crit, let's say you're lucky and you've got plenty of crit circuits to choose from and you're doing 1 race a week or 1 race a weekend. If you're doing that race and absolutely going full gas every weekend, you haven't really got the physical capacity to do really hard sessions consistently through the week, because you've then got that race. So doing those sorts of sessions in the winter, when you've not got that race commitment and you've not got that extra fatigue going on, is a really good time to build, and then use those sort of early season races as your intense sessions. And for the rest of the time, you can just do base or do recovery and make sure you're fresh for the next weekend. So increasing those really intense workouts in winter when you've got the time to do it and you're not worrying about a race coming up, it's a really good time.
Yeah, I think just personally, I find it quite difficult, and I don't know if this is because I've done it for years now, and maybe it's because I'm not as focused on getting to peak shape as I once was. I find it really difficult to push hard indoors. So I could do, tempo, a sweet spot workout, a ramp test if I really must. But if I was to be set 30-30s or a VO2 max workout, I actually struggle to motivate myself to do it. But I don't struggle to motivate myself to go try and follow Kenway on that chain gang or whatever it is. I absolutely love it. And I'm struggling to translate that in my mind, because I know that if I do more of that thing and get fitter, the thing I really enjoy is going to be easier, or I'm going to be able to ride with better people, or I'm going to go faster or get a KOM or win a race, whatever. But I don't know, I just struggle to actually find the will to hurt myself properly on the turbo.
Yeah.
Is that something you experience? That's something you see with people who are coached by you, and what sort of things?
I'm the exact opposite. This is just me, obviously, but I am literally
why you're a machine.
I can't sit on the turbo and just pedal at endurance for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. I just can't do it. Mm-hmm. If I've got an interval session, the time ticks by so much quicker. It's easier to sort of hit your power on the turbo because erg mode's the thing, whereas outside you've got traffic lights, you've got different gradients to contend with, and
you stop with traffic lights.
It's recommended. Yeah. But it's a lot harder to stay consistent with your power. So if you're doing a 10-minute effort for whatever, it's very hard to find a 10-minute constant climb or a 10-minute flat where you can hold the same power for that time. Whereas indoors, it's really easy. You don't even have to think about it. You can put erg mode on and switch off.
I have been there in years gone by. I have been in that situation. But I think it's when I've been fitter and I felt like I can do more training. It doesn't affect me as much. I feel like it hurts and it affects, some nights, if I do a tough turbo workout, I did one a few weeks ago, I wake up the next morning with a banging headache. I've just pushed myself too much on a not very difficult session. But
yeah. And some people can just sit on the turbo and spend hours there and do whatever sessions. But getting back to base training, you do need, if you sit on the turbo for hours, then that's really where you can do base and do zone 2 and get fitter, because you can get the volume in. But if you've just not got that volume to give, something else has got to change for you to be able to get fitter.
So if you're going through your winter and you're doing some intensity, you've got a training plan, all of that, it gets to February, like we did this year, we go to Calpe for a week. All of a sudden, like any good age group athlete, we've got a clear diary, and you think, right, here we go, I'm Pogacar for a week. What are you doing in that week on the bike? Let's say it's midwinter, you're lucky enough to get away at Christmas time or whenever, you've got loads more time, you're away somewhere warm, you can ride lots. Are you still doing intensity, or are you just going...
So are we assuming that volume in that week is going to be a lot higher than your
It could be.
volume?
You've got all day, every day.
Yeah. So in that case then, if the volume is increasing, then that's an increase in training load. So at that point, you don't need to increase intensity because some other metric is changing, aka volume.
Yeah.
So you will get fitter because you're increasing volume. The thing is, after that week, you're going to be decreasing your volume again because you're back home, back to work, back to whatever. So when you're doing less volume, increasing the intensity is a good idea, because you're then still getting fitter because you're changing that other metric.
Yeah. So I didn't think about it much at the time, but we were in that situation. We'd all done some sort of structured training. We were going away for a week together, and nobody even mentioned, are we doing any intervals? It was just, oh, here's the routes for the week. This is where we're going to go. Here's the cafe stops.
Yeah.
Right, wasn't it? And we all just accepted it, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Oh, 100%,
but it wasn't even like a thought in our minds, was it?
Well, I remember chatting to Lee, who was also with us at the end of the week, because I think Lee had come off the back of a couple of weeks of illness. I was ill for the week before. So we'd basically done barely any volume and then gone out to Calpe for a week and done 30 odd hours and thought, well, that can't be a good thing to do.
Being an amateur.
That can't be a recommended training strategy.
No, you want your Strava weekly volume to be like a shark's tooth, so people never know what to expect.
That's exactly what it was like. So yeah, definitely not recommended. But the volume that we were doing out there versus the volume that was normal to us was a massive increase. So there's no benefit to trying to do intervals as well and increase intensity because the volume's increased. So that's the thing that's increasing your overall training load.
So if people get a good or reasonable winter or even a bad winter under their belts and they get to, let's say, late March, and they're looking for some morale, they're looking for the professional treatment, they're looking to get away and perhaps in the sun, Dan, where can they go?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because...
That's 20 quid you just slipped me down there, is it?
We're running a pro experience training camp in Girona in April. So this training camp is aimed at recreational amateur cyclists who want to sort of live and train like a pro for a week. So we're obviously putting on...
So that doesn't mean, we're going to put you in your bike and tell you to ride for 30 hours, is it?
No. It's structured training and making sure that structured training is right for you. So as part of this package that we're putting on for people, you'll speak to Ewan, our performance coach, before you go one-to-one and chat through what your goals are, what your normal training load's like, what you want to achieve, and what your goals are for later in the year. And Ewan will put together a program for you for that week to make sure that you are spending your time on the bike efficiently and effectively, and making some progress towards your goals. So we're putting on that, but we're also putting it on in Girona in a swanky estate with a private chef. Everything's sort of cared for, looked after. We've got a team car to go out on the road with mechanical support and nutrition support, basically everything that the pros get, as well as being able to offer physio, bike fitting, massages, physiology testing, sweat testing, like all the other products and services that we offer here. We're able to take that out to Girona and put on a really cool training camp. So if anyone's interested, head over to the website, ukbikefit.com.
It's in the description.
And there's a little button at the top saying join us in Girona. Click that.
There you go. That's right. I think the key to that is you actually being given the right training for you for where you're at. Whereas when we went to Calpe, we're all doing the same and we're all in different places. And one of us picked up a knee injury halfway through, probably because of the drastic increase in volume. But there you go. Obviously, that will not be happening at that sort of place, will it? So, yeah. Good chat, Dan. Thank you very much. Let us know your thoughts about the winter training down below. And also, let us know what we should cover in the next few weeks. Got a few more episodes planned in, haven't we? But we're often thinking, what shall we cover? What do people want? So if you could save us a job and let us know, that'd be awesome, because we want to give you some value and talk about what you want to talk about. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Cheers.